This is part 2 of my explanation of how I go about grading the final project for programming and logic. I work from the same check sheet that you use to create your final project. In the last video we went through requirement number 9, which was using 3 different dummies to position the camera, and our student fulfilled that requirement. Now let's move on to requirement number 10, which is that a property variable be used in the story. So you have to create a property variable and use it in the story. Go to the Alice file. I generally just click on the Properties tab and click through to the different objects until I find one where a new variable has been created. In this case, she's created 2 new variables, one called my name and one called my title. And if you recall from watching the video, she does say my name is Tiffany, the head cheerleader, or the head cheerleader Tiffany. So it is used in the story. So she fulfilled that requirement. The next one is a method variable. She's got a number of method variables in here. For example, in scene 3, she's got a list variable, which includes the cheerleader, the slacker, the jock, etc. So that fulfills the list requirement as well, but it is also a method variable. So it can be a variable called distance to ball that is used to set the value. The value is set in the code between the student and the basketball. And then later on, if the user clicks that she wants to stay, then the girl moves forward that amount. So she's created a method variable, set the value, and then actually used the value in the code. So all 3 components of a method variable are used in that single one. But she does have a number of variables in each of her methods. So that meets that requirement. Minimum 1 method with a parameter. We discussed in the previous video the nerd's newfound ability to clap. And if you look at that, it has a parameter called num times. So the loop, which is where he puts his hands together basically, the number of times it loops is num times, which means when this method is called, the parameter is asked how many is num times, and it has to be given a number, and that will be how many times he claps. And it is actually used in the code as well. When the world starts, you see that this method is called, and num times is given a value of 1, so he claps 1 time. Also in, I believe, scene 3, in an if-else statement, she decides to stay, then he claps 15 times. So num times is not just tacked on there. She didn't just add a parameter, not use it. It is actually integral to the story and controls how many times the nerd claps. 13, ask user world function. And if you'll recall, there were actually 2 different occasions where she asked. In scene 2, there is a method variable that is called new student. It is a string. So we have an ask user for a string function here where the question comes up, what is your name? The user types in their name and that value is given to new student. So later on, you can have all of the people in the list say hello joined with whatever the user typed in. There is also the option in scene 3 where you can choose whether or not to stay or go. So you ask user yes or no, would you like to stay? So there's actually 2 ask users here, and both of them are used in the code. The second instance, the value of ask user is passed to a variable created called stay. So if you choose yes, then stay is true. If you choose no, then stay is false. And that is the basis of the if-else statement used later. So that requirement is more than met. She twice uses an ask user world function. 14, concatenation, A joined with B world function, or A plus B in Java style. That is used a couple of places as well. In scene 2, when the cheerleader gets who she is, and then that is joined with what is your name, or you'll see a plus sign if you're in Java style. Changed vehicle property. In this case, we have, it's easier if you look at the object tree to see what kind of things we have in there. If you have something like a shield, I generally know that that's going to be carried by someone. In this case, glasses would seem to be the obvious one to me. So if I go to the properties panel for glasses and look for the vehicle, I can see that they follow the new student's head. So when the student walks around, the glasses follow her because the vehicle has been changed. Define and use a minimum of 1 function and use the return value in the story. This is one a lot of students have trouble with, but again is very basically done. I mentioned earlier the cheerleader has the property variable of my name and my title. She also has a new function. I do the same thing. I click on the different objects and look on the functions panel until I find one that has a function that's been created. In this case, it's called get full name. It involves a variable that has been created for the function called full name. The value is set to the cheerleader's property, my title, and that is joined with my name. So we got concatenation, we've got the property variables, we've got a variable, and this is all inside of a function. So several requirements met here with that function. An if-else statement. If you recall, the user is asked whether or not they want to stay in scene 3. So the value of whether they click yes or no is put in a variable called stay. They say yes, stay is true. If they say no, stay is false. And then you have the if-else here. If stay, meaning if stay is true, then the camera moves to the first shot, the student moves forward, and then nerd claps. If they click no, then stay has a value of false, and the camera sets the point of view back to first shot, she turns left, and then she moves forward 10 meters. Basically, she leaves the scene, and the list is used, the list of students, which includes all of the characters on the stage, all say bye at the same time. So that one is met. A loop, referred to before as in the text, or a while statement. That is when you repeat things a certain number of times. A loop is if you know how many times you want it to happen. A while is you want it to happen as long as the condition is met. We do know there is one repetitive action in here, the nerd claps. So if I look, it is inside of a loop. The clap happens num times. The person could have set this to clap 3 times, clap 5 times, whatever, but she chose to put a parameter there. So every time she tells them to clap, she can set how many times this loop will occur. So there is a loop there. This is the big one here, is 10 points. That is a list with either for all together or for all in order statement, or an array with a while or a loop. She chose to go with the list, and again she used that a number of times in several different methods. Because they are method variables, they have to be defined in each method in order to be used. They're local variables, they can only be used inside of the method. So if we look in scene 1, she's got a list of all students. It includes all these, and she uses a for all together. In scene 2, she's got another list of all students, and she uses a for all together. And then in scene 3, if the user clicks no, they don't want to stay, then all students together will say bye. So she does use a list with a for all together and meets that requirement. The next 2 are keyboard and mouse events, and I check those by looking in the event panel. And she does have 2 mouse events. One, when the mouse is clicked on the basketball, it reverts to scene 3, which is where the user is asked if they would like to stay, and that if-else statement comes up. And then also the very beginning of the story, when it first begins, if you click on the gem, then my first method starts. So that gets the whole story rolling. So there's 2 mouse events. You also press the space bar to toggle the instructions, which is similar to what you did with the helicopter assignment. If you look at the code, it's basically this black background and white text, and you've got inside of that a do together, where pressing the space bar will change the is showing to not is showing for both of those. So you can toggle the instructions on or off by clicking the space bar, which is a keyboard event. So mouse event and keyboard event. And then finally there's 3D text, which is obvious in the very beginning. I can look at the object tree to find it as well. She lists those instructions. If I look under properties, I can see what it says, but it's also visible as the very first thing that appears. So she met all of the requirements. So when I give her feedback, I'm going to basically be uploading this file with nothing highlighted and 100 down as total points awarded. I'm just going to real quickly show you feedback to another student who did not do so well, and just show you the kind of feedback I'll give you if there are some problems with your file. So basically this is the file I give everyone. It tells you in red that the requirements are highlighted in yellow, are missing from the project, and the point values have been deducted. Highlight every line for the one you did not get correct. If you just did not have it there at all, it's just highlighted. and it's self-explanatory. If I felt like you needed a little more information, I used these red boxes to tell you. In this case, nothing in the whole story was really working because he had a bee that was flapping his wings. He created that method. It was a good thing, but he set it in a loop to loop infinity. And because it was one of the first things that happened, all of the code after the bee flapping his wings never executed. You have something looping infinity time, you can't have something happen after infinity. It just never happens. In this case, they created some camera movement. They had camera move statements, and I believe they had the camera have a vehicle, so it followed something else, but they did not drop any dummies, and they did not use the camera set position to dummy, so they did not get the points for that one. And again, going back to why nothing happened, because the bee was looping infinity times. They did create an if-else statement, an ask user, had 3D text, all of those, but nothing appeared in the story because the bee just kept flapping his wings. I felt bad about it and gave this person partial credit, but I couldn't give him full credit for all of those things. And here was another error. I gave him some feedback on the mouse event. He had 3 different mouse events, all having to do with a rabbit. One of those things that happened was the rabbit became invisible. So all 3 things happened when you clicked on the mouse, but you didn't see the other 2 things because the mouse became invisible. So some important things to think about when you are finishing your project up. If things are not happening right, email me, ask for feedback. I could have given the student feedback before he turned it in and got this bad grade. I just deduct the points that are highlighted in yellow, and in this case, I gave him partial credit for some of them. That's still not a very good grade. I hope this clears up how I do the process of grading your project, and I hope it makes it a little easier for you to figure out what you want to do to fulfill the requirements in this project.